Happy Monday. Happy Monday. I hope all is well. Um, we is here. It definitely took me a couple of minutes, but hey, we made it. Okay, we made it. It's a new week, it's a new day. Well, towards the end of a new day. Um, but I'm glad we're able to jump on because we're going to continue our conversation from last week talking about unspoken resentment. And yeah, I think last week was really good as far as like getting a good understanding of resentment really is. If you didn't watch last week, we talked about the difference between forgiveness, resentment, and bitterness, and how that may show up in our lives. And we gave a definition of resentment. What else did we do? We also just kind of talked about what the differences between what unforgiveness, resentment sounds like. So if you haven't watched part one, make sure to go back and watch it. It also gave some signs of unspoken resentment and how that would show up. Also, the physical signs, the hidden signs. And then we left with a journaling question at the end, which was if my resentment could speak, what would it say? So for anybody that took the time to do the journaling question, this is a great time to pull it out and we can lead into what happens next, which is how we're going to actually work through our resentments. So yeah, I hope tonight is helpful. If you haven't already, make sure to like the live, share the live with anyone that you think that can benefit from it. If this is your first time, my name is Debbie. I am a certified mindfulness coach and a pre-licensed therapist. By the way, none of this is actually therapy. So if you are seeking out therapy, please go and see and work with a therapist. This is really just informational, primarily from a mindfulness perspective. And I hope that it's helpful. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe. Why not? Why haven't you subscribed yet? Please do. And again, like I said, make sure to like the live and share the live. Check out our website. Hi, Mark. Welcome in. Check out our website if you want more information about mindfulness support. And you can also, if you're in Illinois, you can always check out the link in my comments surrounding therapy or working with me in therapy. Okay, so welcome in. If this is your first time, please let me know where you're watching from. I would love to know that. And let me know in the comments, you guys, how you're feeling, how you are, how was your weekend, all of the things. And we'll go ahead and dive into what we're going to talk about tonight. Just a second, y'all. My mouth is dry. Okay. Hi, Scarlett from Brazil. Welcome in. Okay. So, how do we work through our resentments, right? Like I said, we talked about all of the things. We talked about what resentment is. We talked about how it shows up. We talked about the differences. We talked about the hidden, unspoken resentments. We talked about all of the things, all of the signs, everything, right? So, Debbie, tell me, how do I work through the resentments actually? Hi, Felicia. Welcome in. Hi, Jaden. Welcome in. Or Jason. Welcome in. Um, okay, so how do we work through our resentments? Number one, take the time to understand the root cause. Okay? Take the time to understand the root cause. We can't do anything without awareness. And like I said, in every single one of our lives that we talk about, usually the first answer is always awareness, right? So you're probably tired of in hearing me say that, but that's truly the answer of where to start. Understanding the root cause and making sure that you understand that there isn't really much you can do until you have awareness, right? Um, and resentment may be conscious or unconscious. We talked about that a few lives ago, where we're talking about some of the things that we experience are both conscious and unconscious, and until you're able to bring those things to the conscious, it's going to be hard for you to really take action. All right, so getting down to what matters. So some common roots of resentment, I wanted to give you guys some examples so that way you had at least something to work off of, because it's a lot to explore. And it's not easy to pinpoint. Again, it has to be something that, comes from unconscious to conscious if it's not conscious already. So, a few common roots of resentment: unspoken needs. Okay. And this can show up in many different ways, but unspoken needs. Hoping others will notice what you need without having to ask. Okay. Oftentimes we suffer in silence. And so, in our suffering in silence, when people aren't able to pick up on those things, that creates a irritability or a frustration, which grows into resentment and bitterness. So, unspoken needs is a huge one because of the fact that um, we may not feel safe to speak up and talk about our needs, or we may have done it in the past, and that person or that environment or that group has shown itself to not be a safe space. So, we suffer in silence. So, resentment can build simply off of those unspoken needs and the hope and the desire that people will notice those unspoken needs. And when they don't, resentment and even bitterness begins to build. And it can also build at a rate that you won't even notice. It can be very subtle, and it kind of happens over a long period of time. Okay. So unspoken needs is a big one. Another one would be difficulty asking or receiving help. This is huge for a lot of people, right? We live in a society where it's every man for himself, right? And so, having to ask for help or reaching out for help, or having the vulnerability to say that you need help, because oftentimes just saying, like, hey, I can't do this alone, is hard for people. So difficulty asking for help or receiving help is big, and just having the need to carry everything yourself, and then just getting frustrated that no one steps in to help, right? Whether it be you start to do something and nobody steps in, or you start to do something and people ask for help or ask if you need their help. You may say no, or you may say yes and they don't do it right, or it's not as much help as you may have wanted it to be, right? So it can show up in so many different ways, but that is a huge um, area of a common root of resentment. Okay. So, so when it comes to, I don't know, let's see here. So when it comes to, there we go. Okay. So when it comes to number three, over responsibility. Okay. So taking on emotional, physical, or mental loads that were never yours to carry. Okay. So, over responsibility, taking on emotional, physical, or mental loads that were never yours to carry. Oftentimes, we take on the blame for things. Oftentimes, because of someone else's emotions or someone else's inability to navigate their emotions and their feelings, we start to try to walk around those emotions. Walk on eggshells, rather, is another like term that you may hear, where you're trying to accommodate or appease another person. And because of that, we start to take on the responsibility of their emotions, to the extent that it starts to build a sense of resentment within ourselves, right? So just keep that in mind. Hi, Jinx. Yes, he does. Thank you. Okay, so that was over responsibility. Another one, feeling like your efforts are unnoticed, or efforts are going unnoticed. So giving and giving without feeling appreciated or having the appreciation or knowledge, right? So that feeling of you trying and trying and trying, whether it be in a relationship or in a certain situation or an experience or at work or whatever, however that may show up for you. And even with all of your efforts and all of your trying, there still is a lack of appreciation or acknowledgement. That can build a huge level of resentment. Um, and again, that's something that also can go unnoticed for a certain period of time because you may be a giver, right? You may be someone that likes to give and likes to do for others, but then you do, and then you look up one day and you notice that you're the only one doing. That is a huge, sometimes even a surprise and resentment that can build up. Okay. Um, thank you. Thank you. Is it Girl Dad Cooking? Thank you so much. Yes, please like the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Okay. Um okay. So that was feeling like your efforts are go unnoticed. Another common root of resentment, lack of reciprocity, right? Which kind of goes off of the one previously. Like feeling like you are always the one checking in, showing up, sacrificing, or making the effort. And I feel like reciprocity is truly a heavy one when it comes to relationships, whether it be friendships or family or in a romantic relationship where you feel like you're not receiving what you give, and because of that you feel like you're always sacrificing or you're always giving of yourself and you're pouring and nothing is coming back, right? So that definitely can build resentment. Not feeling safe to express your truth, right? So fearing rejection, disappointment, judgment, or being seen as difficult, emotional, or too much, right? I say that in quotations. That feeling of not being or feeling safe in a situation, in an environment, or in a relationship can definitely build a high level of resentment, especially if you feel overly rejected, or if you feel consistent disappointment, if you feel like you're being judged, if you feel like you can't be yourself, right? That you have to somewhat mask yourself or mask who you are as a person in order to be in relationship with that person. So, yes, there is definitely a high level of resentment that can show up when you're not feeling safe in this space. Another one, ignoring your own limits. Hi, Reagan. Ignoring your own limits, right? So, pushing past exhaustion, saying I'm fine, and minimizing your own needs, right? Consistent or chronic sacrifice of self, right? Not resting when you need to rest when it comes to these limitations, right? So just keep that in mind, pushing past exhaustion, saying I'm fine, and minimizing your own needs. Another one, difficulty accepting reality. This is a hard one, y'all. This is a hard one to digest because avoidance is a huge aspect of resentment. So, difficulty accepting reality, holding on to hope that someone will become who you need them to be rather than accepting who they currently are, right? Holding on to potential, right? Holding on to the glimpses of what things could be. Because that person or that situation shows you glimpses or shows you scenes or flashes of the type of relationship or life that you want with this person. And because you're able to see that, then you hold on to those instances as gold instead of accepting what was the true reality, right? So keeping that in mind. I hope I'm understanding your question, JGW45. Is my girl only wanting me if I'm able to provide means she won't ever like me for me? The love will never be pure. I hope I'm understanding your question. I think what you're asking is if you are with someone that is wanting you only for what you can give to them versus them loving you for who you are. Um, I don't never like to say things in absolutes. So I wouldn't say never be pure is the answer. I think whether it's a high probability of whether it will be pure, if that makes sense. Because of the fact that, yeah, maybe one day she may wake up and see you for who you are, but what's the probability of that actually happening is what you want to more so think about. Because holding on to will be or never be, there's no absolutes in that. There's no way of really knowing whether this could absolutely happen or not. You want to go off of what you see in the now, and accepting reality, right? The reality of what the glimpses and the things that you're seeing now and what she's showing you now, and making a decision from that. Um, there's no way to really know if anything's ever going to be a certain way. And I think that sometimes we operate in that uncertainty, and we hold on to that uncertainty really heavy to the point where it keeps us or limits us in what we can do in the now. I hope my answer makes sense. Um, and hello, Stefan. Welcome in. Hi, Sci Fi. Welcome in. Okay, awesome. I hope that makes sense, JGW. I hope you're having a good day too, sci-fi fan. Okay, awesome. So where were we at? Um, Difficulty accepting reality. So that's what that I think that was the last one. Holding on to the hope that someone will become who you need to be rather than accepting who they currently are. Holding on to potential or glimpses of what they could be. Oh no, unprocessed hurt. So unprocessed hurt or disappointment would be another common root to resentment. Carrying pain from past experiences that has never been acknowledged or healed. And then that's another level of chronic avoidance. Okay. So when you have a high level of chronic avoidance, especially when it comes to your own hurts and disappointments and pain, that builds up to a point where you have a high level of resentment, and then it builds an actual core belief or several core beliefs that you have about the thing. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. Okay, so another one would be comparison. So focusing on what others receive, the support they have, or the recognition they get, and feeling deprived within your own self. Okay, so comparison, focusing on what others receive, the support they have, or the recognition they get, and feeling deprived within yourself. Okay. So when we focus on, sorry, I'm fixing a typo. Um, when we feel deprived within our own self and we begin to compare ourselves to other people, that starts to build a high level of resentment within yourself, whether that be frustration and irritability with yourself and where you are, frustration with the people around you because you're comparing your relationship to other relationships, whether it be other friendships, other romantic relationships, other family, dynamics. So in that comparison, that helps actually fuel the resentment that you may feel within your own self. So understanding that even within comparison, there's some levels of resentment that happens that could be so unconscious. It can show up in different ways, but comparison is a huge one. And then the last one here is a lack of self compassion. So, expecting yourself to constantly be strong, capable, and available for everyone else, right? Feeling like you need to be available and capable and strong all of the time. There is no space for human the human side of you. There is no space for vulnerability. There is no space for anger. There is no space for weakness or hurt, right? There only is space for you being strong, for you being capable, for you being at the top of your game, for you always being on point, for you with you being always being perfect, right? There's only space for that, and there's no space for anything else. There is no space for lack. There is no space for sadness. There is no space for your emotions and feelings. So that was a pretty intense list, but I wanted to make sure that I gave you guys at least something to pull from. Because, like I was saying before, resentment oftentimes can be unconscious. And so we don't know until we know. So I wanted to make sure that I gave you guys at least a list of things that you can pull from that can at least spark a little bit within yourself to say, you know what, I think I do experience that. And it's all not necessarily something that you have to like fix or have to do something about today or even tomorrow or this month or whatever. It's just more so of bringing awareness to it. And then we can continue to follow the steps that I'm going to keep going through. But pace yourself through this. Again, this isn't something that's going to be fixed tomorrow. And also, if this is something that is bringing up a lot for you, it may be something you work through in therapy. This isn't something that you have to do alone as well. And again, like I said, disclaimer, this isn't therapy, this is just informational. So, this is the beginning to the work. So, not saying you can't do the work by yourself, you can. Not saying you don't need a therapist, you may. So I say that all to say you go off of what your needs are currently, but I want to make sure that I highlight that. Okay, so that was number one. Um, Understand the root cause. The beginning of moving past your resentments, understand the root cause. Number two, acknowledge the root cause without shame. This is the big part. Okay. Acknowledge the root cause without shame. And I know I've talked about shame a lot. Um, well, here and there. I'll say here and there. And you may not have a definition of what shame actually is. So I do have one here. So shame is the painful feeling or belief that there is something fundamentally wrong with who you are as a person, right? It is an experience of seeing ourselves as flawed, unworthy, inadequate, or not enough. Right now, there is an element of this is just human, right? There's a human side of us having our limits, that have our boundaries, that have our capabilities and our abilities. That's not what I'm talking about. Shame is more so moving past that to a point where you start to judge yourself and bring yourself down based off of how you see yourself as a person. Shame is more so about identity, right? So sometimes we talk about guilt and shame, right? And I call them the evil twins. Guilt is based off of I did something wrong, and then shame is I am something wrong. Okay, so there's a difference between the two, but they both kind of go in together because usually it starts with guilt and then shame comes thereafter. So I wanted to make that distinction because shame is a just an ugly thing that shows up often when it comes to resentment. So this is why I wanted to make sure with number two that we acknowledge the root cause without shame. Okay, so we often get caught up in how we should feel instead of honoring that we were actually hurt. Okay. So instead of acknowledging the feeling, we judge ourselves and having the feeling in the first place, right? So it goes from, I'm angry to, well, I shouldn't be angry. Oh, it's stupid that I'm angry. Or why am I letting this bother me right now? Something's wrong with me. Why is this such a big issue? That's when it turns from hurt to shame. Okay. So I wanted to make sure I gave you guys some examples here. Just a second. So, acknowledge the feeling we judge ourselves to having the feeling. Okay, so emotions, another thing. Emotions are information. They're not moral failures. Okay. So that's where the shame comes in, where we start to feel like we're morally wrong for having a feeling or an emotion. And because of that, we start to beat ourselves up internally, which then creates resentment, but we still act against the resentment because we feel like we should be a certain way, we should say certain things, or we should feel a certain way. Okay, so here's an example. I shouldn't feel this way. They've done so much for me, right? Instead of saying, oh wait, no, there's a few other examples. Hold on. I shouldn't feel this way. They've done so much for me, is an example. Another one would be, I have no right to be upset, right? Another one would be, other people have it worse. Why am I so upset, right? Other people have it, worse than I do. Why am I so upset about this one thing? Another one would be, I'm supposed to be strong. Why does this hurt so much? Okay. I should just let it go. This is something, that is small or minute, or it's not that big of a deal. All right. So these are just examples of how these root causes can turn into resentment and then create a level of shame. Okay. So the goal is to become curious about what you're feeling instead of saying, I can't believe I feel this way. Instead of saying, I can't believe I feel this way, try, this feeling is here. What is it trying to tell me? Okay. Another example would be, like I said, I shouldn't be upset. Instead of saying I shouldn't be upset, you could say, it makes sense that I'm hurting. What do I need right now? Okay. So I wanted to make sure I gave some examples of what this could look like, but you want to acknowledge what you're feeling. Oftentimes, we have a hard time acknowledging these things. And because of that, we suppress them. And the suppression is what's creating the resentment. When we're able to actually acknowledge the root cause, do it without shame, and really just, it could just be an acknowledgement of, I feel this today. Let me allow myself to feel this. Could be something as simple as that. Okay. Um, Also, when it comes to acknowledging the root cause without shame, address and process any grief or trauma present associated with it. This is also something that you would do with the therapist. Not to say you can't do it on your own, but definitely something I would recommend to do with the therapist if it's difficult. Feel instead of avoiding. And what I just said, making sure to feel instead of avoiding what you're feeling. Give your experience language. Understand how it affects you in the body, right? Make meaning of your experiences. That's really how you actually process, grief or trauma. Okay. So that was number two. Acknowledge the root cause without shame. I know that was deep, y'all. Make sure to rewind it if it was too much at one time. But make sure to rewind and go back and listen back to that. That was number two. Number three, what are the core beliefs as a result? So, like I was saying before, when we have a high level of resentment and it turns into bitterness, it starts to shift or shape the paradigms that we may have internally in regards to what we believe. Okay. So, what is your current belief system and how has it changed as a result of this resentment? Okay. So I have this resentment at my job. And now with that resentment has been sitting and sitting and sitting at my job. Now I have a core belief that I'm not good at this job anymore. Right. So then you begin to consciously or subconsciously self-sabotage yourself and your job because you have built up a high level of resentment at work. Right? That would be an example. So, what is your current belief system and how has it changed as a result? There is a story, there is a narrative we have told ourselves that we have to begin to question. Okay. Oftentimes resentments are going to be linked to a narrative or a story that you begin to tell yourself every single day. And you telling yourself that story or that narrative every single day continues to fuel the resentment. So it's not just about getting an understanding of the resentment and where the root causes is coming from, but also understanding how it affects how you see life today, right? How does it affect how I see people? How does it affect how I see myself? How does it affect how I see my environment, right? And as you start to explore your belief systems around whatever it is that you have resentment on, um, getting an understanding of whether is the belief always true, right? Because usually resentment statement core beliefs are going to be say blank always blank, right? So men always this, women always that, right? This group of people is always this, right? It has a lot of absolutes, okay? So the first question you can ask yourself is this belief always true? Where did I first learn this? Is this belief protecting me or limiting me? And what would a healthier, more compassionate belief sound like? Okay. Now, this is a lot to work through. Again, this is me introducing you guys to it. It's a lot to work through. So if you, again, feel like you want to work through this with a therapist, please do. If it's something that you feel like you can work through yourself, pace yourself. Don't rush. Don't rush through it. Okay. So I'll say those questions again. Uh, when it comes to core beliefs, is this belief always true? Where did I first learn this core belief? Is this belief protecting me or limiting me? And what would a healthier, more compassionate belief sound like? Okay. Um, and it's okay if is the belief protecting me or limiting me. It's okay to say both because that very well may be the answer. There is times where we put things in place, whether it be again consciously or subconsciously, that protect us, but also limit us. Okay. So with that question, even though it's either or, if the answer is both, walk through why. Walk through both why they both are the answer. All right, that was number 3. We have where we at? Okay, we got a little bit of time. We have 3 more here. Yeah. Okay. So number 4, find the reframe. Resentment is not bad. It's a source of information that a need, a feeling, a boundary, or an expectation, or a truth has gone unaddressed. Okay. So, again, all of our emotions are information. Okay. And when it comes to our emotions, maturity comes when you're able to submit your emotions to truth. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with the emotions actually being there. It's more so of, okay, now that I know that this emotion is here, how can I submit that to what's actually true? And how can I allow truth to override those emotions? Okay. So, like I say this all the time, emotions are teachers and they just teach us about ourselves, about other people, and about our environments. And the more that we're able to treat our emotions as teachers instead of these big, ugly, scary things that pop up in our minds and in our spirits and in our soul, the better off we'll be because we'll start to approach our emotions a lot differently. It will go from, oh my God, I'm so angry to, okay, I'm angry. Why? Where is the anger coming from? Where is the source? Right? It starts to shift how you see emotions and how you deal with those emotions. So finding the reframe is basically submitting your emotions to truth and action. Okay. So find the reframe. Resentment is not bad. It's a source of information that a need, feeling, boundary, expectation, or truth has been unaddressed. So, what is your resentment trying to tell you? That's how we ended our last live. If it could speak, what would it say? All right. How can I reframe that? So a reframe exercise. So if you have your old beliefs, so remember we went through our core beliefs, the core beliefs that may have come up based off of the resentment that we're experiencing. So maybe the old belief would be my needs don't matter, right? That may be an overall blanket statement that you may feel or have a core belief of, right? A new belief to counter that would be my needs are worthy of attention and communication, right? And that's not even a reframe, that's just a direct rebuttal, right? My needs don't matter. Well, why? Who said that? Where did that come from? Who said that? Right? My needs are worthy of attention and communication would be a new belief that you can replace that with, right? Another old belief could be I have to do everything myself. I used to be that person. Okay. A new belief to that is I can ask for support and allow others to contribute or to help, right? I can ask for support and allow others to help. All right. Another old belief could be if I say how I feel, people will leave me. Okay. That could be a core belief that you just didn't notice that was there that comes up. A new belief could be healthy relationships can hold honesty for repair. So it's an understanding that if people leave, then maybe that's not a healthy relationship for me. Maybe that's just not a relationship that I'm supposed to have now or ever was supposed to have, right? So there's those are just ways to reframe those core beliefs that may be coming up, right? And if it's even if that is a core belief of if I say how I feel, people will leave, what's wrong with those people leaving? What is it about that relationship that you want to make sure that you're holding on to? Is it the fact that they're family, right? Is it the fact that this is a long-term relationship, someone I've known for a long time? Like getting an understanding as to why them leaving is very important to you because could be just I love that person and that's the person that I want to be with. There are so many different reasons as to why, but getting down to the core is crucial or critical when it comes to stuff like that. Um, and even if it is that you love them or they're a family member or whatever, just because that they have held that in your life doesn't mean that they always have to. Okay. And it doesn't mean that they won't again. It just means that maybe this is a time for you guys to separate, even if it's for a period of time. Okay, number 5, take responsibility for any part you played. What did you have in control, right? What were some of the things that you had in control that you could have done differently, right? And this isn't to blame yourself, right? This is just a matter of accountability. So that way you're able to go into new situations differently. So that way you're not building up resentment again, because resentment can be a vicious cycle. And it's something that even if you get out of the relationship or get out of the situation, if it's not something that you've dealt with or have had some level of accountability for, when you go into the next situation, or you go into the next relationship, or you go into the next thing, it can all happen all over again. And that's what happens often when it comes to resentment. And it gets to a point where people get to a certain point of their lives where they isolate and they don't talk to anybody because they've had multiple cycles of bitterness and resentment, right? So take responsibility for any part that you may have played. What was in your control? Where do I have power to respond differently moving forward? Did I communicate my needs clearly in this relationship or situation? Did I say yes when I meant to say no? Did I expect someone to know what I needed without communicating it? did I continue a pattern that was hurting me and I knew it was hurting me, but for whatever reason, I continued that pattern, right? So thinking about and taking accountability and responsibility for the part that you played, not to say that you played all of the cards, right? But you had to have put one or two cards down, right? So keeping that in mind and understanding that those small shifts and changes can make all the difference in the next go round. Okay. And then last but not least, number 6. I hope this is helpful, y'all. Let me know in the comments. Number 6, communicate what has been unspoken. All right, this is the hard part. All right, we talked about how it shows up. We talked about the core beliefs. We talked about taking responsibility. We talked about the reframes. We talked about all of the things. There are going to be some instances where you may have to communicate what has been unspoken, right? So it's one thing to know, but it's another thing to take action and communicate in the most effective way, right? Now, not all situations are going to require communication, but for those ones that do require communication, it's going to, it may be difficult and you may have to be brace yourself or get to a point where you are comfortable with at least moving forward to communicate those things. So, communicate your feelings and speak from your experience, right? Communicate your feelings and speak from your experience. When you communicate with people about unspoken resentment, you don't necessarily want to go into it with a voice of accusation. You really just want to go into it and explain your feelings and how you experienced them, um, and not necessarily accuse them of anything. Like, you did this, you did that, you did this, you did that. Oftentimes, when it comes to communicating unspoken resentment, you talk about, well, this is what happened, and this is how I experienced it. Communicating it that way makes all the difference versus going in with pointing fingers. Um, Hi Mia, thank you. I appreciate it. Um, but yeah, so communicate your feelings and speak from your experience, not accusation. All right. Communicate boundaries that need to be set. So if this is a relationship or a situation that you have to continue with, right? Whether it be a good example is if you are up with someone, but you still have to co-parent with them. That's a huge one, right? Because at the end of the day, your romantic relationship may have ended, but you still have to communicate with this person in order to parent your child or children, right? So communicate. So in those instances, you may have to communicate boundaries moving forward in order for you guys to be effective co-parents. Another example would be if it's at your job, right? And then you have an instance with a coworker, and now you still have to work with that person, but there are some high levels of resentment for whatever reason within that co-parenting or not co-parenting coworker relationship or with your boss or whatever, right? So in those instances, since you're still in that situation, you may have to communicate boundaries. Okay. Another thing when it comes to communicating what's been unspoken, understanding that communication does not guarantee change. I'm gonna keep it real with y'all. There's one thing I'm gonna do for y'all that I want y'all to know is that I'm going to keep it real. All right. So just because you communicate and you may say it beautifully, you may say it with all the bows and the whistles and the rainbows and all of the things and sprinkles and glitter, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that that person or that situation or that environment is going to change. So with that, you want to go in and understanding that, and that doesn't mean I hear y'all with my spidey senses. That doesn't mean that you don't communicate it. Because I know that y'all probably like, okay, well, then what's the point of talking and saying it, Debbie? There is a reason because of the fact that you get a chance to release what's been sitting inside of you. And sometimes having that release is the healing that you need. Hi, sci-fi fan. This is really helpful. I definitely plan to go back and catch the replay because you went over a lot of information. Listen, yes, I did. That's why I be breaking stuff into 2 sessions because it'd be a lot. And I think that even though I am a mindfulness coach, I think as I am getting closer to the end of my work as a intern and almost I'm 3 quarters away from graduation and licensure. I think that therapy is just kind of pouring out of me even when I don't intend to. So ultimately it starts to just build and build and build. But it is a lot of information, so that's why I always post afterwards like the and save the live so that way you guys can go back to it because I know it is a lot of info. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, understand the communication does not guarantee change. And then lastly, under number 6, when ready or needed, right? Practicing forgiveness, even if it's just forgiveness of self. Okay? When ready or needed, practice forgiveness, even if it's just forgiveness of yourself. Always start with forgiving yourself, right? And it could be just forgiving yourself for not speaking up for yourself, right? Because that's really the core of resentment. The core of resentment is lack of self advocacy, right? And so there may be some level of guilt there or shame, like we talked about, or there may be some level of resentment of self because of the fact that you didn't speak up. So, starting with forgiving of yourself, but also, when warranted, going through the process of forgiveness of others, only because forgiving others is a release within yourself. It's releasing and letting go of that control that happens when you are hurt or harmed by someone and now they live rent free in your head, right? So forgiveness is a level of letting go of the offense, not necessarily saying that what they did was okay and not condoning their actions. And it doesn't even mean reconciliation, right? It doesn't mean we got to be best friends. It's just a matter of letting go and releasing what was happened so that way you have this space to heal from it. Um, if you haven't spoke to a friend for a long time and you can feel like an unhealthy amount of time has lapsed, is it quite likely that there might be some resentment brewing in the background? Absolutely. Yes. I'm observing certain behaviors that are questionable indicators. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um a lot of times resentment can build way after the fact, right? Because of the fact that we may and then also too, I feel like people dismiss this also. You may try to squash things. You're like, oh, it's good, it's squashed, like it's all good, and then it comes up later on down the line. Like even when people say that things are squashed and they don't necessarily mean it, resentment builds up afterwards. So yeah, most definitely. Um is it Stundre flower? Yes, I'm good. I'm feeling okay. Thank you for asking. But yeah, so yeah, that is definitely a big aspect of resentment. Resentment can be tricky, y'all. I'm not gonna put it together in one little bow as if this is how it shows up and this is the only way that it shows up. It can show up in many different ways. And that's why I went through last week the differences between unforgiveness, resentment, and bitterness, because they're all intertwined, but they are very much different levels of unforgiveness, really. It all stems from that. So yeah, resentment can show up in many different ways, and it definitely can show up way after the fact. It's like you see people that you had, a situation with in high school, and you see them 10 years later, and it's the same energy, right? It can last for a long time, for a very long time. And then, like I said, eventually turns into bitterness, which is definitely can shift those core beliefs even more to be absolutes. All right, y'all. So I hope this is helpful. These are the 6 ways. Is it six? Yeah. These are the 6 ways that you can work through your resentments. Number one was understanding the root cause. Number two was acknowledge the root cause without shame. Number three was what are the core beliefs as a result, or find out or understand the core beliefs as a result. Number four was find the reframe. Number five was take responsibility for any part you played. And then number six, communicate what was unspoken. I have a declaration that you can take away. um, Feel free to write it down, change it however you want to. If it makes some more sense for you to change it or shift it, but this is just a declaration that you can say to yourself. Me myself personally, I love declarations. Not everybody likes declarations or affirmations. You can do them however you want to. Declarations are usually longer, where affirmations are a little bit more shorter. But I love a good paragraph of declaration. But this one, I would say, this is a good place to start, and you can kind of add to it. And declarations are usually something that you would treat as an affirmation, where you would state out loud. You can state it in the morning. You can state it in the mirror. I personally feel like you should say them out loud. Some people don't like saying affirmations out loud. I think it's important for your body to hear what it is that you want to declare. But yes, the declaration I have here is today I choose awareness over avoidance. Okay. Today I choose awareness over avoidance. I will pay attention to what resentment is trying to teach me. My needs are worthy of expression. My boundaries are worthy of respect. And I no longer have to carry the unspoken. Okay. I'll say that again. Today, I choose awareness over avoidance. I will pay attention to what resentment is trying to teach me. My needs are worthy of expression. My boundaries are worthy of respect. And I no longer have to carry the unspoken. All right. I hope this is helpful, y'all. I hope this gives at least an initiation of working through resentment, because I know, again, that this is not something that is going to be fixed overnight. And you may work through resentments in one situation and have multiple other situations that you have to work through or want to work through. So again, I say this and I plead with you guys, please don't beat yourself up about this. Please don't try to force it to force yourself to healing tomorrow. Pace yourself. If you need support, please reach out for support. If you need a therapist to work through this and you're not ready to do it on your own, please do that, right? This is all just an introduction to that space. And if it's something that you're really dealing with, you probably would need therapy to go through it all, okay? Um, let's see here. How would you handle someone who has studied human psychology? Would that change your way of addressing any resentment? No, I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change that. Good. I'm glad that you like it. No, I wouldn't. And let me clarify actually. So when you ask, how would you handle someone who has studied human psychology? Does that mean like you're in relationship with someone that has studied human psychology and you have some resentment towards them? Is that what you mean? I hope that's what I'm assuming, but I want to make sure I double check. Um, but yeah, no, I hope that this is helpful. I hope that this sheds some light. Um, Again, if this is your first time, my name's Debbie. Debbie with an I, not an IE. Um, and I am a certified mindfulness coach and a pre-licensed therapist working under a doctor in psychology. as of right now. And I'm 3 quarters away, y'all, from graduation and me taking my tests for certification. So I am excited. My next quarter starts next week, and I'm ready for it to be done. I'm ready for it to be done, y'all. And I started my my program while I was doing this channel. So y'all could even go back to 2024 when I enrolled and announced that I enrolled into school, and now we're here, okay? Um, so it's been a long time coming. I wanted to stick around, Sci-Fi. I wanted to make sure I answered your question. Did I answer your question? If you guys haven't subscribed, make sure to subscribe. This would be a friend. Okay, so this is a friendship that you have with someone that has studied human psychology. And because they studied human psychology, you don't want to address the resentment that you have with them. You feel like they're going to kind of try to use their knowledge against you in a way. Is that how you feel? I'm assuming. Tell me if I'm wrong. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Tell me if I'm wrong, if I got that wrong, Sci-Fi fam. Because I feel like, unfortunately, people that are in the field know how to manipulate with it. So that's what I'm assuming. That's what I'm assuming that you're thinking. I feel like it's oh, thank you, Sci-Fi fan. I feel like with when it comes to people that are in the field that that you may be afraid that they're going to use what they know to manipulate a situation, right? Or they won't be receptive. Okay. That they won't be receptive to a situation. You want to take into account when you're communicating your unspoken resentment, um, safety, right? Um, there isn't necessarily always every resentment that you experience has to be communicated, and that's what I wanted. That's what I said. When you communicate what is unspoken, you definitely don't always have to communicate everyone. Sometimes working through resentment is just acknowledging the hurt and navigating that within yourself, right? Whether it be someone has passed away, or whether it be someone you don't have access to, right? Or whether it be someone that just is not a safe place to land. Okay. So if you know for a fact that this person isn't necessarily a safe place to land, you could do one or two things. You can communicate what has been unspoken for your own release and not expect have an expectation for what they give back to you, right? Because there's some instances where someone may say something or give out or get out what they need to get out to a person, and that person may not say anything back, right? You can write somebody email, write somebody a letter, you can leave a voicemail, you can send a text message, whatever, that looks like, right? And they may not say anything back, but you releasing that is the action of healing, right? So it's up to you, okay, on how you would want to address that, because communicating how you feel doesn't necessarily have to be in person, doesn't necessarily even have to be over the phone. Like I said, it could be you writing a letter, it could be you writing an email, just for so you're able to release that. And then if they give you an answer back, then fine. If they don't give you an answer back, then fine, right? It's just a matter of releasing what it is that was unspoken, right? Making sure that it lands a certain way isn't the goal when it comes to speaking your resentment, right? Or giving your resentment a voice, right? I think it goes back to when we were talking about number 6 is understand that communication does not guarantee change, right? It's not going to necessarily always work out in your favor. It's not always going to work out in the way that you intended, but the action of releasing is the healing piece of it all, right? Now, if they respond back and they apologize, or they respond back and they, accept an apology, or they, acknowledge your feelings and emotions, that's a plus. That is the icing on the cake, right? But the true core of the cake is that batter, and the batter is just releasing what it is that was unspoken. Okay. And I'm not going to tell y'all to do something that I have not done myself. I have gone through, and I have, over this past year, I've written emails, I have written letters, I have reached out to people that I had resentment towards. I've sent text messages, I've had conversations, right? And so this is not something that I'm telling you guys to do that I haven't already done myself. And some of those responses were positive responses, and some of those responses, they were either positive. I would say, if I think of all of them, they were either positive or there were just no response at all, right? And so in that, there was still freedom that came out of all of those scenarios, um, outside of me just kind of trying to see or seek out an actual response, or how they're actually going to respond, right? So there's healing in it all. And again, like I said, pace yourself and decide what makes the most sense for you. Okay. Okay, great. I'm glad that it was helpful. All right, y'all. Well, happy Monday. Have a great week. For those who are in the US, happy Juneteenth on Friday. Enjoy your day. I know I will. I am off. And so, kind of off. I think I have a client on Friday. But outside of that, enjoy your day off. And I will see y'all all next Monday. I will post new. Yeah, I think there wasn't the other topic. The third topic that was on the last poll wasn't voted on a lot. So I will post new topics on during the weekend. And y'all all have a great rest of your night, and I'll see you next Monday. Be blessed, y'all.